For 12,000 years, Ethiopia's Haile Gubbi volcano was silent. Then it exploded without warning, blasting ash 45,000 feet into the sky and sending a toxic cloud racing across continents. Within 36 hours, villages lay coated in grit, Delhi's skies grew darker, and flights from Africa to India were grounded. How could a remote volcano paralyze millions, half a world away? The chain reaction begins here. At 8:30 in the morning on November 23rd, the ground near Afdera split open with a deafening roar. In seconds, the Haile Gubbi volcano, silent for 12 millennia, unleashed a column of ash that shot 45,000 feet straight into the sky. The sound was so powerful it rattled windows 50 kilometers away. In the village of Afdera, dust and grit rained down, blanketing roofs, courtyards, and animal pens in a thick gray shroud. Livestock scattered in confusion. The air tasted of minerals and glass, sharp and metallic on the tongue. The falling ash left a fine, powdery coating everywhere. Local administrator Mohammed Said stood in the swirling haze, his radio crackling with frantic voices. He counted people, checked on the herders, and scanned the sky for more signs of danger. He reported that while no human lives and no livestock had been lost so far, many villages had been covered in ash, and as a result, their animals had little to eat. The fields that had fed goats and camels now lay hidden beneath a layer of powdery grit, water troughs filled with muddy ash. For a community built on grazing and movement, the eruption threatened not with fire, but with starvation. Ahmed Abdallah, a resident, described the moment the volcano erupted. It felt like a sudden bomb had been thrown, with smoke and ash. The shock wave hit first, a deep physical thump in the chest, followed by a choking darkness as the sun vanished behind the plume. People stumbled outside, covering their mouths and eyes, searching for loved ones in the swirling dust. Some tried to sweep the ash from their doorways, but it kept falling, relentless and fine. Children coughed and huddled close to their parents. The village mosque, usually a landmark in the desert, faded into the gray. The community felt the full shock of the event. Tourists and guides bound for the Danakil Desert found their paths blocked. Vehicles stalled on roads coated with slippery ash, and visibility dropped to a few meters. Stranded travelers waited for news, unsure whether it was safe to move or to stay put. For the Afar region, the eruption was not just a spectacle in the sky, it was a crisis unfolding on the ground, reshaping daily life in an instant, and leaving thousands to reckon with what would come next. High above the Afar Desert, the eruption's ash plume met the jet stream, a powerful, invisible river of wind that circles the planet at speeds topping 150 kilometers per hour. In less than half a day, what began as a local disaster became a global phenomenon. The ash, laced with volcanic glass and minerals, surged north across the Red Sea. Yemen's skies dimmed as the clouds swept overhead, and then Oman's mountains disappeared into haze. By the next morning, the plume had traveled more than 3,000 kilometers, riding the upper-level winds eastward. Jet streams, flowing between 9 and 16 kilometers above Earth, act as expressways for airborne particles. Once the Haile Gubbi volcano's ash entered this fast lane, its fate was no longer tied to Ethiopia. The ash cloud arced over the Arabian Peninsula, passing Sana'a and Muscat, and then out over the warm waters of the Arabian Sea. Meteorological satellites tracked the plume's progress in real time. Within 24 hours, the ash had crossed into Pakistani airspace, trailing a faint shadow over Karachi and Lahore. Pilots en route to South Asia received urgent advisories. They were told to avoid certain altitudes, reroute if possible, and expect turbulence and poor visibility above 25,000 feet. By the 36th hour, the ash had reached the Indian subcontinent. Delhi, already choked by its own winter smog, braced for a new threat arriving from 7,000 kilometers away. The journey of the ash cloud, traced by scientists and weather agencies, made clear that a volcanic eruption in the Horn of Africa could disrupt life across half a continent in barely a day and a half. The atmosphere itself became an actor in this unfolding drama, carrying the signature of Ethiopia's eruption across borders and oceans. From the first blast to the arrival over India, the ash traveled at a pace only possible in the jet stream's grip, turning a local event into an international emergency with astonishing speed. Delhi wakes to a haze that feels all too familiar. The city's skyline, already blurred by winter smog, now carries the invisible trace of a journey that began thousands of kilometers away. Meteorological reports confirm the volcanic ash plume from Ethiopia has reached northern India. But at ground level, the story is one of dilution, not disaster. Air quality index monitors across Delhi blink with their usual warnings. On a typical November morning, the city's air quality index hovers between 350 and 500, deep in the hazardous range. This is not new. Diesel exhaust, crop burning in Punjab and Haryana, dust from endless construction, these are the daily burdens that press on Delhi's lungs. The volcanic ash, after traveling through jet streams at 13 kilometers above the Earth, arrives as a faint addition, measured in fractions per million. Scientists at the India Meteorological Department describe it as adding salt to the sea. The plume's altitude keeps it mostly out of reach for those walking city streets or waiting at bus stops. Hospitals and clinics, already accustomed to the annual spike in respiratory complaints, see no sudden surge linked to the ash's arrival. Masks remain a common sight, but not because of volcanic glass or minerals. Delhi's residents have long adapted to the city's own pollution. The difference now is almost academic. Air samples taken by researchers show that the volcanic component is dwarfed by the city's chronic pollutants, PM 2.5, PM 10, nitrogen oxides, and sulfur compounds from local sources. The volcanic ash, so dramatic in the headlines, is barely a whisper against the city's relentless background noise. For those who track the numbers, the data offers reassurance. The ash cloud remains high above, thinned out by distance and time. By the time it drifts over the Indian capital, most of its dangerous particles have either settled out or remain suspended far above the breathing zone. The real threat, if any, sits at cruising altitude where aircraft engines and sensors are vulnerable. On the ground, the risk is lost in the overwhelming tide of everyday pollution. Delhi continues its routines. Markets open, schools operate, traffic crawls through the morning fog. The city absorbs this latest global event with a kind of practiced endurance, shaped by years of living with air that is often ranked among the world's most polluted. The volcanic ash may be a new arrival, but for most in Delhi, it is just another layer atop a sky that has long been heavy and gray. The crisis, for now, is measured in flight paths and advisories, not in emergency rooms or city streets. By mid-morning, the aviation sector in India was thrown into chaos. Air India, Indigo, and Akasa, three of the country's largest carriers, issued immediate cancellations for dozens of flights. The decision came after meteorological alerts confirmed the Ethiopian ash plume had reached flight levels between 25,000 and 45,000 feet, the critical cruising altitude for most commercial jets. Pilots and ground crews scrambled to adjust schedules, but the orders were clear. No aircraft would cross the affected corridors until further notice. The impact rippled far beyond airport terminals. Cargo handlers in Mumbai and Delhi watched as shipments of fresh flowers, seafood, and temperature-sensitive medicines piled up in warehouses. India's vast export industry, which relies on daily air connections to the Middle East and Europe, faced mounting losses by the hour. Flower exporters, who depend on overnight flights to deliver blooms to Dubai and London, saw entire consignments at risk of spoilage. Pharmaceutical companies whose vaccines and specialty drugs require an unbroken cold chain scrambled to reroute deliveries or halt them altogether. Cargo delays threatened livelihoods and contracts. For passengers, the disruption was immediate and personal. Families with wedding plans, business travelers, and tourists found themselves stranded at terminals, staring at departure boards filled with red cancellations. Airlines struggled to provide rebooking options as the backlog grew. On social media, frustrated travelers posted photos of empty check-in counters and unmoving queues. The financial toll mounted with every grounded plane. Airlines faced not just lost ticket revenue, but also the costs of refunding passengers, rescheduling crews, and paying for airport slots they could not use. For cargo operators, the stakes were even higher. Each hour of delay meant more spoiled produce, missed deadlines, and broken contracts. In the pharmaceutical sector, a single missed shipment could mean millions lost, and patients left waiting for critical medicine. The cost of safety was rising by the hour. Aviation authorities justified the shutdowns with a simple calculation. The risk to aircraft engines and passenger safety outweighed any economic cost. Memories of past disasters loomed large. The 2010 Icelandic eruption closed 300 airports and grounded 100,000 flights. Two separate Boeing incidents in 1982 over Indonesia and in 1989 over Alaska saw all engines fail after encounters with volcanic ash. The lessons were clear. Volcanic ash, invisible to radar and deadly to engines, could not be underestimated. Safety came first. As the hours dragged on, airport logistics managers coordinated with customs officials and freight forwarders, searching for alternative routes by road or sea. But for many perishable goods, time was running out. The chain reaction from a single volcanic eruption in Ethiopia now threatened livelihoods and businesses thousands of kilometers away. Managers counted grounded flights and lost cargo in real time, racing to keep supply chains intact. Jet engines are built to withstand storms, hail, and even the occasional bird strike. Volcanic ash, though, is a different enemy, and it attacks from the inside out. At cruising altitude, the air entering a jet engine is compressed and heated to temperatures above 1,200 degrees Celsius. Volcanic ash, made up of tiny shards of glass and pulverized rock, softens and melts at temperatures just over 1,000 degrees. When these particles are sucked into an engine, they do not simply pass through. Instead, they begin to fuse and stick to the hot metal surfaces deep inside the turbine. Molten ash coats turbine blades, clogging cooling channels and building up into glassy deposits. This blocks airflow, disrupts fuel combustion, and can cause the engine to choke and shut down mid-flight, a phenomenon known as flameout. The threat does not end with the turbines. The same sharp, microscopic glass fragments act like sandpaper on moving parts. Compressor blades lose their polished edges, reducing efficiency and risking imbalance. Ash-laden air scratches cockpit windshields, turning them opaque and robbing pilots of forward visibility. Sensors that measure airspeed, altitude, and temperature can be blinded or jammed by ash, leaving crews without reliable data in critical moments. Even the aircraft's air filtration and ventilation systems are at risk. Volcanic gases like sulfur dioxide can seep into the cabin, irritating eyes and lungs, and posing a hidden danger for passengers and crew. Unlike weather systems, volcanic ash clouds are invisible to standard aircraft radar. Pilots may not even realize they have entered a contaminated zone until warning lights flash or engines begin to surge and falter. The only clues might be a faint acrid smell, a sudden haze in the cockpit, or the sound of ash pelting the fuselage. In a matter of minutes, a modern jet can go from smooth flight to complete engine failure, all because of particles finer than table salt, carried thousands of kilometers from their volcanic source. The physics of volcanic ash turn a distant eruption into a direct, mechanical threat at the heart of the world's busiest air corridors. On June 24, 1982, British Airways Flight 9 crossed the night sky above Indonesia when smoke filled the cockpit, and all 4 engines failed. Volcanic ash from Mount Galunggung invaded the turbines, melting into glass and choking the engines. The 747 dropped from 37,000 feet to 13,500 feet before the crew managed to restart the engines, saving 263 lives. 7 years later, KLM Flight 867, another Boeing 747, flew into ash from Mount Redoubt over Alaska. All engines lost power. The aircraft plunged, alarms shrieking, until the pilots brought the engines back one by one. Both flights landed safely, but the message was unmistakable. Volcanic ash could cripple even the most advanced jets in minutes. In April 2010, Eyjafjallajökull erupted in Iceland, sending ash across Europe. Over 300 airports closed, 100,000 flights were grounded, and millions of travelers were stranded. The shutdown cost billions, freezing supply chains and revealing how a single volcano could halt a continent. These incidents forced aviation authorities to confront the limits of their warning systems. For years, forecasting volcanic ash relied on scattered satellite images, pilot reports, and weather models. Alerts often arrived too late, or they were so broad that airspace shut down unnecessarily. Scientists and engineers pressed for better answers, knowing the next eruption could come without warnings. On November 27, 2025, the UK Met Office launched a new volcanic ash forecasting system. For the first time, airlines could access gridded predictions for every layer of airspace up to 60,000 feet, hour by hour, worldwide. Mark Seltzer, lead scientist, explained that with this tool, disruption from an event like the 2010 eruption could be cut in half. Karen Shorey, an aviation specialist, described how the new data would help keep more flights moving safely. With real-time science guiding decisions, the memory of BA9 and KLM 867 remains a warning, but the world is no longer flying blind. The hope is that the next volcanic crisis will be met with coordination and clarity, turning the hard lessons of the past into a safer future. A single eruption in Ethiopia grounds planes and darkens skies thousands of kilometers away, proof that nature's boundaries ignore political borders. As global air travel expands and climate instability grows, even distant disasters can disrupt millions of lives overnight. Preparedness is no longer local, it's planetary. The next plume could rise anywhere, at any moment. What do you think? Are we ready for what comes next?